Hi guys, welcome to Keynote 4 in the eCommerce to Sell conference. Hope you're enjoying it thus far. This particular session is really exciting to myself. And that's because we're talking finance, we're talking planning. It's a weakness of me. That's why I have partners to do it. But our current speaker, Matt Putra, is a CFO, outsourced e-commerce CFO. He's going to introduce himself, and he's going to be talking about using scenario planning to optimize your quarter 4. I would hand over the mic or mantle, over. And thank you, Matt. Just do your thing.
Thank you. Yeah, so my name is Matt. Like I said, I work for a number of e-commerce agencies and brands across the UK, the US, and Canada, basically helping people manage their cash flow, optimize their profit, and scale sustainably. So with that, why don't I jump right into the presentation. Okay, so I'm calling my keynote, use scenario planning to optimize your Q4. This is probably not going to be the sexiest of the keynotes because I'm going to talk a little bit about risk and how to set yourself up to manage that risk over the course of Q4. I'm going to talk about why you should optimize, why you should use scenario planning, what is scenario planning, and then how to do it. So that's all these things here. And then we'll go into a little bit about some economic reports where you can find them and some consumer insights at the end. So getting right into it, the talk is called using scenario planning to optimize your Q4. So why do I say the word optimize? Well, as you can see here, optimize means to make the best of or most effective use of a situation, opportunity, or resource, where I don't say maximize because maximize is make as large as great as possible. So I don't want you to maximize your Q4 sales. I'll get into why a little bit later. The reason I like optimizing is because it takes a holistic view of a whole bunch of variables and potential outcomes, and it optimizes for the best potential outcome with all those things. When you talk about maximizing, it's a singular focus. So if you talk about maximizing revenue, it's a singular focus on maximizing revenue. That's your only goal. So I don't want you to do that. Optimization, I think, is building for the long term. Maximization is definitely building for the short term, and there are definitely cases where you should be doing that. For example, if you're looking at exiting your business next year, maximizing your net profit or your EBITDA is a really great goal to have. If you're building for a longer term and you want to increase your shareholder value over a long term, I would suggest optimization is your best plan. So let's keep going. So why you should optimize? Okay, so we have a lot of risks emerging in this new climate. We have a Delta variant. We have potential new variants. Everybody knows the global supply chain shortages. A brand that I own, we're having a really hard time sourcing product. Inflation is taking off in the States and in Canada, not as much in the UK yet. Shipping has been an issue for a lot of people I see on LinkedIn. iOS 14, everyone knows that one. It's hard to track who you're advertising to. Your cost of acquisition is going up. Facebook can't find the right people. iOS 15, we're worried about this because, of course, we might lose email open rates and a bunch of other things. Staff shortages and retention are going to be an issue as we go into an inflationary environment. And we're already seeing this. Restaurant workers are not wanting to work. Those lower paid employees can go anywhere else and find another job. So we're all going to be dealing with staff shortages and retention. And then consumer behavior is another one. So we saw during the pandemic, no one expected this, but because the governments around the world pumped liquidity into consumers' hands, they spent a lot of money. So a lot of us had a really great 2020. Are we still going to have a great 2021 or Q4? Who knows? So I'm going to get into a little bit about how you can figure this stuff out and how to, optimize your Q4 by adjusting these variables. There are more risks. I would suggest brainstorming a bunch of these with your team as well. Okay, so all those risks, what do they mean? They mean that you now have to forecast farther out. So where you could get away with a 3-month forecast or a 2-month forecast, now you have to buy things earlier because of the supply chain issues and the shipping issues. So for example, like I say, one of the brands I'm working at, we are now having to buy product a lot earlier than we would in a normal run up to a Q4. We also have more uncertainty. There's a lot going on. Who knows what's going to happen? If there's another variant that shuts the economy down or shuts the social distancing or closes the economy again. Again, there's just a lot of uncertainty in the market. So now we're forecasting further out with more uncertainty. So here's what I'd suggest for your goals. As you work to kind of figure out what you're going to do for Q4, I have two suggested goals. Goal number one, manage risk, manage your cash flow, and maintain a cash buffer of around 3 months operating expenses if you can, if it's reasonable. But with a very uncertain environment, it's always good to have a cash buffer to weather things that go wrong. And this is goal number one. Goal number two is, of course, profitability and capturing potential sales. So like I say, I don't necessarily think people should be trying to maximize the amount of sales they're going to get in Q4 because you're going to miss things. So let's say you plan for a Q4 that's double or triple or whatever it is over last year. You go and you buy the inventory to support that. But now you've overpurchased and sales don't materialize at triple or double. So now you're stuck with a bunch of inventory that could go obsolete. You're going to have to run sales to get rid of it. So for me, what I'm thinking about this Q4 is managing my risk, maintaining my cash flow. So what that means, honestly, is you might just sell out of things and you're not going to have time to reorder for the holiday season. But will you live to fight another day? Yeah, of course. But if you go overspend on something, will you live to fight another day? Well, it puts that in jeopardy. So again, I say goal number one, manage risk and cash flow. Goal number two is then capture all the sales that you can capture. So what is scenario planning? Just real quick, let's cover this. So what I like to do is I like to have between 3 and 5 potential scenarios that cover your Q4 and then Q1 and 2, because again, your business doesn't end after Q4. So if you have a cash flow or a sales plan that ends right after Q4, you're blind to what could potentially happen with your cash flow in Q1 and 2. So I would like you to have something that has Q4, Q1, 2, just to see how your Q4 efforts play into the business continuing on in Q1 and 2. So scenario planning basically is you create a financial forecast. So usually people will do a profit and loss and like a bit of a cash flow. Each scenario will be in a different spreadsheet. That's the easiest way to do it. Each scenario lives in a different spreadsheet. So you're going to have one spreadsheet that's your base case. So this is kind of the assumptions that everybody sort of agrees on. This is probably what's going to happen. Hopefully it's good. Then you're going to have a worst case. You're going to go, well, this is probably the worst that could happen to us this year. Then a best case, let's say your CAC is down, sales are up, inventory costs are down a little bit, and sales are double. So that's like your best case. Like this is the best that we could do this year. And then there's a universe of scenarios that are in between the best and the worst, and hopefully the base case, hopefully things work out just like the base case or better. But it's good to have a worst case because you want to know what is the worst that could happen, and it helps you find ways to manage risk. So if the worst that can happen is you buy too much inventory, you don't sell it, now you have a cash flow problem. If goal number one is to manage cash flow and risk, well, don't buy so much inventory. Allow yourself to sell out this year so you live to fight another day. The other bonus points, if you can find a scenario or two that produce a cash issue or profitability issue, I would say if your worst case doesn't produce a cash issue, you don't run out of money in that case, find a scenario, make one where you run out of cash. And the reason why I want you to do that is because I want you to flex all the variables you can, make your model run out of cash, and then go back and look at it. Well, how likely is that scenario to happen? So if your CAC goes up by 1.5 or 2, could that happen? Well, maybe it could. If emails, you can't track open rates and Facebook can't target. What if you hire that person and they don't perform? What if sales are not double, they're 1.5 or, so find the case where you run out of money and assess how likely that is to happen, and that will help you manage risk again. So scenario planning, what is it? You're going to have 3 to 5 different workbooks, different plans, and that will help you manage risk. And then, of course, when you have the plan in place, or when you have the scenarios in place, find the points that cause issues and manage those points, whether it's inventory buying, whether it's maybe you should get a line of credit, that kind of thing. So, of course, you can make 3 to 5 scenarios, but they don't mean anything if they're not at all realistic. So how do you make a realistic scenario? In this particular environment, with so much uncertainty, things going on with global economies, variants, marketing issues, tax regime changes, government, there's so much going on. I want you to go get advice. So I want you to look at economic reports. We talk to your marketing agencies or other marketing experts. And the thing is, they all talk to each other too. So you'll be able to get kind of a breadth of a view across how marketing should perform. Talk to your banker. What are interest rates going to do? What is inflation looking like? Talk to your lenders. Again, ask them about interest rates. Ask them what they see happening in the market. Talk to the specialists on your team. If you have a marketing director, use them. If you have a purchasing manager, use them. What's happening with the supply chain? What are you hearing out there? Talk to your foreign exchange specialists. If you don't have one, find one and just get a half hour or pay them for an hour to consult. What's going to happen with exchange over Q4, Q1 or Q2? Again, talk to your suppliers. We've been actively doing this at one of the brands that I own. We're talking to our suppliers. Hey, what's happening right now? Are people buying early? Are you going to be able to source product when we need it? What about shipping? Can you ship us the product when we need it? And so the feedback that we're getting is we should order early and get POs in very early so that we can make sure we get the product we need for Q4. Talk to your wholesale accounts. So if you have wholesale accounts, call them. Hey, we have these few drops coming up. Which ones do you want? Give them a further discount if they pre-purchase, maybe. Get their orders down on paper so at least you have some idea of how to forecast what inventory you need for Q4. That's something we're actively doing. And then talk to your accountant. If you've been with them for a while, they know you, they know your risk appetite, they know your business, and then they should have a broad view on the economy. Not as good as some of the others probably, but they should have a view. Ask them, what do they think? How should I approach this Q4? How should I manage risk? Should I buy this? Should I buy? Just get all the advice you can. Step number 2 is get consensus. So take all the advice that you've been given, make your scenarios, and get consensus on those scenarios from your senior team, your finance team, or other executives in your company. And the reason I say this is because, again, what used to work where I would, let's say, make a forecast and I'd have 3 to 5 of my own and run with them, that doesn't work as much now because, again, like I say, there's so much uncertainty. So I'd like you to present your forecast. Everybody should have an opinion. Well, everybody that you consult, take their opinion into account. On that base case one, make sure that the other members of your senior team or your other owners or whatever, make sure they all agree that this is the plan that we should actually try to follow. And that will protect you as much as is possible. It will protect you from downside risk. And okay, and these are a couple sample scenarios. So this is a couple things you could use. So one, sales are up, inventory costs are up, inventory is purchased earlier, CAC is up. So again, like I say, where you'd normally purchase inventory for Q4, maybe in September or maybe sort of October, we're starting to purchase now for Q4. So make sure that cash outflow comes earlier than it would before. What if costs are up? Again, shipping is a problem. So shipping costs are going to be up, which obviously affects the cost of your inventory. We are seeing a little bit of inflation in our product cost as well. And then sales are up. Number 2, try one with your sales down and holding the other 3 points from the scenario 1. But sales are down, costs are up, and everything's purchased earlier. What happens to your cash flow? What happens to your profit? And again, if you have a cash flow issue, mitigate that risk. There's a brand that I spoke with out of the UK recently who could have gotten savings on their inventory costs by purchasing more earlier. My suggestion to them was pay more for it, buy later. Why? Because again, my number 1 goal is to manage risk and manage cash flow over this Q4, Q1, Q2. Scenario 3, sales down, costs up. You purchase too much inventory. What happens? Number 4, sales up, inventory costs are flat, purchased earlier. Okay, so basically these are not the only variables you're going to use, but this is an example of how to set up some scenarios. Like I say, your base case would be the one that you think is the most likely, and then find 3 to 5 other scenarios that make sense. The goal with the scenario planning is, of course, obviously managing cash flow, but when you create your scenarios, you want between the worst case and the best case, you want them to be as tight as possible, but reality should land somewhere between those 2 forecasts. But you don't want to create them too wide. You want to create them as tight as you can, but you want to capture reality, and in doing so, it'll help you manage cash flow and risk. Okay, so my recommendations, again, like I say, cash over margin. I'm suggesting people to take a hit on margin to preserve cash flow, especially this year. In a different year, I would say go for it. Go for margin, go for sales. Not this year. We don't know what banks are going to do. If you run into cash flow issues, we just don't know what's going to happen. So manage risk. Number two, get a line of credit. If you don't have a line of credit, go try to get one. Now, some businesses might be a little too early for a bank to lend to for a line of credit, but if you can get one, I suggest getting one. Here's why. A lot of us purchase insurance for businesses. A line of credit is like your insurance for your cash flow. Even if you don't use it, most banks will charge you between 50 to 100 bucks a month just to maintain an open line of credit if you don't use it. That's 1,200 bucks a year, let's say. That is well worth it to have a 100 or 200 or $400,000 line of credit if you overbuy inventory and now you're sitting on it and your cash, you have this big huge buffer to save you from an issue. It's worth the 1,200 bucks a year. I recommend to everybody right now, if you can get a line of credit, go get one. The rates are great, and it's just well worth it. And then Warren Buffett's rules. Rule number one, don't lose money. Rule number two, don't forget rule number one. Now, I don't actually know if he even said this, but I think the point remains the same. It's about managing risk. Don't run out of cash. If you all you can remember from this talk is one thing: is don't run out of money. Live to fight another day rather than shoot for the moon. So that's a brief. That's the overview of scenario planning. Hopefully, you guys will get a chance to have this deck as well. I'm going to quickly cover two more things. One is the economic forecasts. Where can you find them? I have some links here. The second is a couple points about consumer insights. What I wanted to show you is you can see here, this is the Consumer Sentiment Index from OECD. I have a link for you. In the States, consumer sentiment just took a big drop off in July. So this is important because if 2020 was really good for e-com and 2021 has been rebounding, can you still count on the rebound in the States? I don't know. I really don't know. The UK is doing great. The rest of the world's doing okay, but the States took a drop off. The second thing for consumer insights is there's a study that's done out at the University of Michigan. It's updated monthly. I have a link. They survey a number of consumers every month to ask them what they feel about the future. One insight for you guys is you should raise prices. Most consumers in the States are expecting price inflation, meaning that they're expecting you to raise your prices already, so you may as well do it. And one brand I work with has raised prices by 10% across the board with zero ill effect. So that's my presentation. Thank you so much.
No, incredible stuff, Matt. Thank you so much for covering this. My takeaways from this was optimize, don't maximize now. Forward planning is critical. Preserve cash flow. Do not run out of money. Raise prices. Who would have thought? Raise prices. In terms of inflation, you have to raise your prices.
Yeah.
And go for margin. So incredible. I particularly like the graphs you shared later, which is more around the consumer confidence and all those resources. It's a pleasure having you, Matt. Incredible stuff. Thank you.
Thank you, Kunle.